Good morning.
Hello, hello.
Hello. All right. Friday the 22nd. I was getting a chuckle just before we were starting the call because, good evening, Saurabh, because I've talked about it a few times now, the notion that people need to be admitted to the call and how undesirable of a setting that is in Google Meet. And so I think with that, hopefully we'll have an update next week where we're switching platforms. So, oh boy, okay. Link to the meeting minutes coming into the chat. Busy day today for some of the community members. Actually, I was up pretty early working with a few of them. Much going on. Let me share the meeting minutes. We'll have a few other people join. A couple of housekeeping items. We record the Layer5 community meeting calls, post those on YouTube for the enjoyment of many others later on. Surprisingly, there do seem to be many others who watch. So that's good. Please slap your name down into the meeting minutes if you're on. Well, while we're waiting and while I'm grabbing this link, I'll toss in this small anecdote. And that is last night we had a virtual meetup for Cloud Native Austin and Docker Austin, at the end of which one of the attendees asked if this was being recorded and the recording would be available later. And naturally assuming that the recording had automatically started when I started hosting the meetup, I didn't double check that. So that's one less recording that people will have to watch, I guess. That's too bad. The only saving grace there was that wasn't the first time I was presenting that topic, and so there were prior recordings of it. So, all right. What window am I even sharing or on, or what am I doing? Okay, very good. Well, it's actually 6 after. And so that means it's about time to get going. There's a couple of us that are on today's call that are under deadline for other items due today. So we might have a shorter call, which means that for once, I will shut my yapper pretty quick. On that, I am pleased from a couple of perspectives that we have about today's agenda. Maybe if for nothing else, I'm really pleased that I think there are others on the call, or I know that there are others on the call who, where it is earlier in the morning for them than it is for me. So that I take great pleasure in that. The second reason why I'm excited about today's agenda is that we've got, we've got Mr. DeArkland here with us from HashiCorp, who has been espousing all of the goodness about some new functionality latest releases of Consul and Consul service mesh functionality. He's here to share with us today, so special guest, that's great. Welcome, Cody. Two quick announcements, and that's just one that Kush Travetti had recently written a blog post, and so it's out. If you find any mistakes in there or things that you think are missing, then we should probably write another blog post. Luke Juggery, Docker Captain, has a draft blog post up. He's invited really the community here to weigh in on it and see if anything's missing, and so jump in there if you're inclined. There's a DockerCon presentation coming up. There's a bunch of other activities that frankly we just didn't have time to track today. And so with that, a quick call for topics outside of our discussion and kind of presentation of Consul functionality. If others have topics that you'd like to cover in the community meeting, now is the time to get those listed. If you don't, that might actually be good, because instead of running over like we usually do, maybe we'll actually be somewhat professional about ending on time. So fair enough. Blake, thanks for getting Consul on the agenda. There's enough of the audience here, whether they're on now or that will watch later, that I think, in our discussions we've been yearning for. We've been behind on Consul, sort of as a community, and kind of as the Consul mesh readapter, and so I, for one, am pretty excited about today's topic.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, and then who's this fine gentleman that you've got with you here?
Yeah, so this is Cody DeArkland. I'll actually let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Cody.
Blake just brings me around to act as like a bodyguard and play jokes for him. That's pretty much all I do. So, no, I do. So I partner up with Blake and do technical marketing for Consul. So Blake builds the sausage. I present the sausage in really nice ways. So that's probably the best way to describe it. I've been doing a lot of work with the HashiCorp Consul service on Azure, as well as just Consul in general. So Blake asked if I wanted to come share the goodness with everybody, and so here we are sharing the sausage.
Yeah, Cody, then it begs the question, I guess, as you make that sausage look good, is that a makeup kit next to the lightsaber? Is there like lipstick that you use to?
No, I'm not seeing that. Oh, like this one right here?
No, I'm sorry. Horrible bad joke. I mean, as you put lipstick on a pig sometimes.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, sorry. No, but the lightsaber.
Oh, lightsabers for when people disagree and don't think it looks good, right?
Can we have a demo of the lightsaber next week? That would be...
we I always take the opportunity to demo the lightsaber.
Yeah.
That's the Disneyland lightsaber.
Wow, it's got the sound and everything.
It's got the sound and everything. Community calls already off the rails. 11 minutes in.
That's awesome. So 1.8 then. That's the latest and greatest. It's hot off the press. This is not beta. This is GA. Or?
So 1.8, and I'll let Blake speak up, obviously, because it's a little bit his baby. But 1.8 is in beta. GA is a little ways out. Unfortunately, what I'm showing today, and we can totally derail, and I can show both in a very quick way and still keep you on track. But 1.8 is a beta. The one that I'm going to show on HashiCorp Consul service is still on 1.7.2 because it's a production platform. So we're not going to run beta on a production platform. But honestly, I'm way more excited for 1.8 than I am at HCS right now. There was a lot of really good stuff in 1.8. Anything you want to say, Blake?
No, I agree. I'm pretty excited about it. It's a really big release from our perspective. A lot of cool capabilities. We did a webinar last week with the CEO or CTO of HashiCorp, Mitchell Hashimoto. So if you want to go look that up, check it out. You can find a link to that on our blog. We walk through some of the new features that are available, like a native ingress gateway in Consul, terminating gateway, and a couple of other pretty exciting enhancements. So yeah, it's definitely beta. If you want to try it out, you can do so on a dev or test environment, and we're looking to make that available as GA like the first or second week of June. So pretty shortly here.
What's fun about that, just like to kind of mention, is that like one of the things when I was prepping for this call, like it's always a little bit of a bummer to do like the public cloud resources, because it means that like anybody on this call has to go spend money to try it out, right? So like anything I show you right now, you're gonna have to go, or, well, anything in the HCS platform I show you is you're gonna have to go like spend some money to deploy and time and all that stuff. But what's cool about like 1.8 as far as like a thing to talk about, and like the ingress gateways, the terminating gateways, all of that stuff that was added in, like you can go pull down the binary right now from HashiCorp and play with it. Like you can run it in a single node on your laptop. Blake and I could take like the WAN fed feature that came out and connect our laptops together with Consul plus like ngrok on our workstations, and we could like literally mesh between our workstations if we wanted to, like instantly. So like that 1.8's a real fun one to play with, because like everybody on this call could go use it right now. Like we could walk through setting all of that stuff up if we wanted to. Not in the time limit we have. Probably take a little bit longer than that. But that's the more exciting thing for community calls for me than the HCS stuff is. Probably not supposed to say that, but.
Is there anyone, Nitish, have you fully, acclimated or materialized into? I think you might be the only proper Microsoft representation today. So
I wouldn't call it proper yet. I'd say like 30% Microsoft representation.
Okay, fair enough. So no, only 30% offense taken, Cody. We're
It's the status bar is going up every day. So
it's like the Windows update, right?
Yeah.
Like 30-35%. Please don't power off the computer.
That's how long they take to integrate another company into Microsoft.
No, like, but the thing about HCS is it's cool for its own reasons, right? I'm skipping a little bit ahead right now. What I think is like interesting about HCS is it's less that like Consul's a thing, and it's more the fact that like using HCS you can create consistent networking in Azure with Consul. Like obviously you have like the backplane networking of just regular subnets, but when you look at how like AKS clusters communicate, they typically communicate in an island, and you can peer them up, but they're not a single mesh at that point, right? They're individual networks and they're connecting as individual networks. But like when you use HCS, you can wire these things all up into one single network. You can apply policy on that. You can do traffic splitting between that. So like talking about 1.8 versus like Consul, and mind you, like HCS is going to have 1.8 very, very soon. Like this was a topic I chatted with them about yesterday. Like it's going to happen very, very soon. So this debate has a shelf life, but what's the things that are cool about HCS are cool because it's in Azure and because it's a platform for creating that like consistent service mesh for everything inside Azure, whether it's virtual machines or multiple Kubernetes clusters. 1.8 is just cool because of like we kind of complete a lot of our like I would say our gaps in the service mesh story, and we extend the things that we did in service mesh to be a more complete story with what's already in customer environments today. So
yeah, the native ingress piqued my interest. So yeah, that would be nice to hear more about that.
Yeah. Anything you want to add on the HCS versus 1.8, Blake?
Nothing in particular on that topic. Happy to go in ingress a little more, either now or offline, whatever you think makes sense, Lee. But I can provide you a little more detail on what we're looking to do there in the short term, and then kind of what's our roadmap for that going forward.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll digress for just a moment, just because it's relevant to, in part, what we were looking to show during the DockerCon demo. And that is having a small sample app that because of its small nature, only having a couple of services, that we're or I think initially when we had this demo app, it was a single service. Granted, we know very well that, hey, the service meshes are sort of written in context of many services. So probably you'll get most functionality, most benefit when you've got a larger service or multiple services set up for your app. Anyway, it was just a point of reflection for some of us involved, that like, oh yes, that's a reminder that there isn't an ingress gateway, so to speak, that comes with the version of Consul that's available today. So.
Yeah.
While you start talking about it, Blake, I'll bring up the share so you can see, so people can see the UI, and I have the ingress gateway up, so like you can kind of talk through it if that would help you, give you a little visual backup.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. So Lee, what you mentioned is exactly the problem that we were trying to solve. Today, when people deploy Consul Service Mesh, if they want to set up an ingress or allow that ingress connectivity into the cluster, they need to immediately go and rely on a third-party solution like Ambassador, HA Proxy, Glue, one of those things that integrate with Consul. What we wanted to do by providing a built-in ingress is to have a more batteries included experience, allow you to stand up Consul and not have to rely on a third party, have something that's built in that can facilitate and allow that north-south connectivity. That was really the goal of bundling this together. And so, this gateway is really designed to help enable service-to-service communication as you're migrating services into the mesh. And potentially some applications, they may be exposed to end users within your enterprise, but it's really to help, I guess, again, in that migration. Our goal is specifically not to try to build a full-featured ingress like some of the other solutions in the market, just because that's a big undertaking. There's already a lot of great things out there. HashiCorp has a very strong partner ecosystem, and we do integrate with a couple companies that I previously mentioned that play really well in that space and have a lot of good set of functionality. And so we don't want to go reinvent the wheel. This was, again, just to make the getting started experience on Consul easier. But then if you develop into more advanced use cases, we would recommend folks go and deploy something that is better suited for that scale or those features that you're looking for. With that said, I will say that this proxy is implemented using Envoy. So there is scale built in. It's not like we wrote something from scratch. We are using Envoy, same as for our sidecars within the service mesh.
One thing to call out that I think is like it goes on to the end there of what Blake said about it being on Envoy. Like from a technical architecture standpoint, what makes me excited about having a native ingress, like Blake's totally right in that there are companies that do this as their business. So obviously they're going to have a bigger feature set. They're going to be like more full feature because that's all they do. But what really excites me about us having one is that now this ingress gateway is part of the mesh directly, right? Like it's built into the mesh, so we can do like traffic splitting and stuff right at the edge of the mesh instead of having to use like you could use something like traffic or Kong or Ambassador, and you could split traffic outside, but that traffic policy now lives outside of your service mesh, right? It's two environments that you're going to manage that traffic policy in. And it's not like this insurmountable task. I don't want to like spread FUD that it's this horrible thing. That's totally fine. But for like the getting started and the quick start experience, it's nice to have it all inside of one platform and be able to say that, look, all of my traffic splitting happens here as well. All of my security policy happens here as well. I like the integrated aspect of it. I like that, and I brought up the ingress gateway config over here. I like that I can set this listener up, and then in the same, like the next stanza, I can set up my traffic splitting and see it all configured directly against Consul. I like that I can dump the Consul configuration and see both ingress setup as well as traffic splitting setup and split between environments. So like there is, while it is very like entry level as far as ingress goes, and it is very like basic, there are still some really cool features that open up some advanced use cases around even stuff that's like very basic. I've had a couple of conversations with customers. It's hard to say, where they have very small environments, but they're looking just at ways to do simple app lifecycle. How do I bring in version 2 of an application and not have to do this 100% failover to the new app, right? Simple 90%, 10% traffic split is a pretty easy thing to accomplish with that. So I think it's pretty cool. Makes me happy. Starts my Friday off well.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add to that is that because it's so well integrated, we do offer mutual TLS from the ingress to services within the mesh. So you have that security at your edge all the way in. The ingress is also able to take advantage of things like Consul mesh gateways. So mesh gateways provide or enable service-to-service communication between different Consul clusters across the internet, hosted on different cloud environments. And what we support failover. So if you have service instances in data center 1 and they become unavailable or unhealthy, you can fail those over to data center 2. With the ingress solution, you can still take traffic in on DC1, but again, if there's instances that are unhealthy, the ingress can fail over directly. You're not having to do any kind of external DNS redirection or anything like that to move users over to that secondary data center.
And Blake teased on something there that's I have to mention it now. My favorite feature of 1.8 is what we've done with the mesh gateways. So without going down too deep of a rabbit hole, Consul works on a gossip system between the nodes in an environment. So all systems have to be able to, or typically have to be able to communicate over those gossip ports. So if you have 5 servers that are Consul things or 5 nodes that are Consul things in data center 1, that gossip communication has to be able to talk to data center 2 as well over a couple of specific ports, but that's still holes you have to punch in your firewalls for those 5 to be able to talk to those 5. We enhanced the mesh gateways in 1.8 to add this WAN federation capability, and it's a long name. I wish we would get to a place where we make names a little a little friendlier. But what it ends up doing is being able to send all traffic through the mesh gateways. So this is my 1.8 demo environment. I did the demo with Mitchell last week, and this is the environment I used for that. And between these 2 data centers, there's 1 port open. So I have 9998 open between AWS and Azure, and all of my service mesh traffic runs through that port. So this is a 3-tier, like this demo application. If I go and hit, and we are like way off the demo rails here, so this might not, things might break. Beware. So like this application is communicating across Azure and AWS right now. And if you look inside of Consul, we've got the front end service. It's coming in through the ingress gateway. We hit the upstream. We can see upstream's pointed at the front end service. I've got 2 instances of the front end service. These are both living in AWS. If I take a look at the intentions, we can see I have an intention allowed from the ingress gateway to the front end service. So I'm allowing, to Blake's earlier point, TLS is allowed, communications allowed between these services. If I flip down to Azure, oh, it's because I know why that is. That is a UI bug for beta. If I switch on to Azure, we can see I have my API tier, and I have this external Postgres database. So if we look at the app, we can see I've got good connectivity to API and good connectivity to database. There's something unique about the database here. That's actually an external service. That's Azure Managed Postgres. So I have a terminating gateway that is set up to resolve service mesh entries to external services, specifically this Postgres database outside. So the translation here is we can bring services that are not a part of the mesh, that we don't have a sidecar running on, that we don't have Envoy running on, into the mesh with terminating gateways. And the speech I give to like the internal teams love to say that this is for like legacy services, right? So if you have a big Oracle database or a big Postgres database in-house, that you can drop a terminating gateway and connect to it. But we have to remember that legacy doesn't always mean old, right? Somebody could have spent a lot of time to migrate their on-prem databases to managed databases in Azure. And that's not an old platform. That might be legacy for them because of the journey and the speed of the velocity they're moving at, but it's certainly not an old platform at that point. And they want to be able to have that consistent communication to that service as well. So terminating gateways solve that. All of that is long-winded to say all this communication between these environments is happening over port 9998 on just that mesh gateway. So that's my favorite feature, is that I think that's going to end up being a very, very, very popular and very big thing. When you're not forced to set up a VPN for any connectivity between sites, and you're not forced to set up like an express route or a direct connect. There's benefits to those from like service level agreements around like connectivity guarantee. But if I want to very quickly connect my desktop to Blake's and play Minecraft, we can do that. And that's ultimately what we're all trying to accomplish here. So.
Yeah, really, especially on this call. That actually is a great goal for this call in particular, is to have a fully meshed community meeting at some point. That would be, that's Blake, we'll have to.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't know how many people on here have used ngrok before, but it was kind of I was talking to one of our developer advocates, and we were tossing around this idea. So I came from, I don't know if I'm supposed to say these things publicly on here. I came from VMware before this, so I have a lot of friends in that community still. And a lot of them are like on this journey as well, trying to figure out how this kind of like next generation tech plays in their world. And I was talking to one of the community members who's got just a massive home lab. And he really likes the idea of service mesh, but he doesn't really know where to get started with it. He's like, I have an SX running, I have all of this, I have all this traditional networking stuff set up. How can I start to use service mesh? And I was like, well, dude, we'll get on a call. We'll do this as community style. We'll jump on we'll do the HashiCorp like HashiCast thing, and we'll link up our environments using service mesh on Consul. So we'll run it locally and connect those two environments together. And I'll show you how we can have your stuff in your lab connect to stuff in my lab over a single port. So, but yeah, community call would be fun doing that. I would be, even though I'm doing that one with them, I would gladly do one as a group. Like we could easily federate a bunch of desktops together. Oh, where I was going with that, the developer advocate, I was telling him about it so he could help me get it set up. And he's like, dude, don't do port forwarding, just use ngrok. And it was this mind-blowing moment of like, yeah, that's right, because ngrok is just proxying the TCP traffic anyways. So like if you're running ngrok on your desktop, you can easily have mesh gateways communicate between environments pretty simply.
Yeah. Boy, I forget. I'm surprised that I forget the name of Alex Ellis's
inlets.
Yeah, and the reason I say I'm surprised is because he does that, because he hawks that thing nonstop. So you think it'd be tip of my tongue. What an amazing thing that he does there.
Yeah, Alex is great people. I remember the first time I found OpenFaz, it was this very mind-blowing moment for me. Like it was a very big deal. Alex is great people.
Let me clarify on the terminating gateway for, like in the example that you'd used about someone having migrated to their database to a managed database service. In that case, is the terminating gateway here a logical instance, a logical configuration, or is that a separate sort of physical deployment of an Envoy?
Yeah, so in this case, so the terminating gateway here is running inside of Azure, and it's actually running on a node. So I have a VM that I've deployed in Azure, and I've thrown Consul on it, I've thrown Envoy on it, and I've configured that node as a terminating gateway. So it is effectively like a machine sitting in there proxying the traffic, for lack of a better word.
The difference though between like the terminating gateway and say a sidecar in the mesh is sidecar typically represents a single service in the mesh. A terminating gateway is like an egress proxy that can front multiple services. So you can have 10, 20, 100 behind a single terminating gateway and scale those out, appropriately based on your load.
Nice.
And we can see it connects services here. This is just very, like I said, very simple Postgres database pointed behind. But what's interesting about this is we have, so like it ends up being a full featured demo, right? To the previous point about putting lipstick on a pig. We have ingress running. That this ingress is pathing into UI bug. The ingress is pointed into this front end. Front end communicates over the mesh gateway down to the API tier. API tier talks to the terminating gateway, who resolves its Postgres database.
Is that modeled in the routing visualization, that all of those hops?
No, that's a favorite topic of mine and Lance's to talk about. So we do have this routing view to Blake's point. It handles the layer 7 routing visualization. So if I had splitters set up, so say those two nodes that I have were actually two different versions, I could see them both here and I could like balance traffic between the two of them. Right now, the visualization doesn't include the full service, but that's a very, very, very active conversation, I would say. Yell at Blake if you'd like to see that.
I was more so just trying to get you to show this page. I think it's cool when you do see different routing splitting, and helps you reason about your configurations versus just looking at the text. You can actually see what's the end result of everything that I've actually configured. How are packets going to flow after all this stuff is processed and evaluated. Well, I guess with that, kind of derailed a little bit off of to new features and things. Cody, you want to maybe give the demo about Azure and show what we're doing with HCS?
Absolutely, absolutely. So most of the stuff I had a deck, but most of that stuff we've already talked about what Consul is and what it does. So I'm just going to stick with the live demo path, since that seems to be working pretty well. So we'll bail out of this Consul environment, bail out of the demo app. So here I am in Azure. If we bring up my, let's see, we should have a instance in here that was still deploying. Here we go. So this is the HashiCorp Consul service on Azure. You can access this. I jumped in a little too soon there. You can deploy this by going add, typing in Consul. Shows up in the catalog here. So what this deploys is a fully managed Consul environment. So all the work that I did on that other demo to stand up these individual nodes, we can actually just run this and it will deploy out an instance of Consul. If I go into my existing Consul node in here, so this Consul HCS, and I hit the UI, we can actually see the Consul UI built into this environment here. And this gives us all the same capabilities that I just talked about, with the exception right now of the whole federation aspect. Right now, you can't federate an HCS cluster, meaning you can't connect it to another server cluster externally. But you can join multiple environments to this one. So I can bring multiple Azure Kubernetes service clusters into this and route traffic between those clusters. What we're doing, a lot of like the sales teams and I are talking about this as becoming kind of central plane for managing the way applications communicate between platforms in the environment, or within Azure, I should say. So we can go down here, we can hit the resources view, I can hit the properties of this and grab the actual address. A couple things to call out for those who aren't familiar or are familiar with Consul and how it works in general. This environment is ACLs are turned on by default. What that means is that any services that need to register will need to provide their token. Just makes it a more secure environment. Just adds another layer of security, but you can also use this to break out access to this environment. Right now I've applied this global token so I can see everything, but if I was registering additional services, I'd come in and I'd create additional policies that would allow me to register. But we can add additional clusters into this one. Now this cluster I just realized is created incorrectly, so I'm not going to be able to demo actually joining AKS to this today. I can do that at a later date for you guys. You guys got your demo fill on the 1.8 environment. And the reason I can't do that is that I deployed this onto the wrong subnet. I meant to deploy this onto a subnet that was not overlapping. And the reason that is because we actually use Azure peering to peer AKS clusters to the HCS environment. And what that does is allow the nodes to all communicate. And that's mostly because of the previous example I gave around nodes all needing to be able to communicate with each other, right? What I talked before about between environments, but it still applies within one cloud as well. All agent nodes need to be able to talk to other agent nodes. And when you're behind the traditional Kubernetes routing, you can't do that. With AKS, we have the ability to deploy with the Azure CNI that gives you the ability to have every pod have an IP address, but you still need to peer the network that HCS creates to that AKS network. And just so you can see the fail, if I go into the networking, which I would typically do when I do a demo, I would go into this managed network or managed resource group. I would hit this VNet for Consul. So Consul creates its own VNet. I would go in and I would peer this. I would choose the network that I wanted to peer against, which is this demo network. And I'll just give it some words here. It's going to error because it's an overlapping network. So I've got an overlapping prefix in there, so I can't peer those two things together right now. So that part of the demo is a fail. But we use Azure, Consul and Azure to bind these like virtual machines, not bind, mesh these virtual machines and Kubernetes clusters together. And we're able to do all of that traffic splitting stuff I showed before. I've got a couple of videos out. The most interesting of them is where I take a virtual machine that's running an application. I set it with a traffic splitting policy to say that 90% of traffic goes to, or 100% goes to the virtual machine, nothing goes to Kubernetes. I deploy version 2 into the AKS cluster, and I show live migrating that traffic using layer 7 policies into the Kubernetes cluster. And it kind of tells the story there of people have systems that live in existing environments today on virtual machines, whether it's on-prem or in public cloud. And they want to be able to have a path to like gradually move over. This whole progressive delivery concept, like James Governor talks about. They want to be able to gradually move traffic and gradually do these things progressively without having it just be a light switch that gets flipped. And we kind of unlock that ability using Consul. And that's stuff you can only really do with a service mesh, right? You can certainly make that work with like complex load balancers and traffic weighting between environments, but it's certainly not as simple as just applying a splitting policy and having it bounce between 2 environments. So right now, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done in order to add. Well, I won't say a lot. There's a script we run that is deployed with the Consul Helm chart. So if I go to let's go to github.com. We deploy this Helm chart, and there's a script in here that's specifically for HCS, and this will go in and basically bootstrap the cluster for adding Kubernetes clusters to it. It'll pull down the necessary configurations, like the certificate, because it is TLS encrypted by default. It'll pull down the certificate. It'll set up the gossip communication. It'll set up the security keys, and let you basically quick start an AKS cluster in. So you can have an AKS cluster joined to this in about 2 minutes after you start running the script. It'll join up, and you can do a Helm install, and it'll add to Consul. So we distribute this as part of the Helm chart. So definitely take a look at that. The Helm chart is pretty awesome. That team pumps out a new version, once a week probably, Blake, right? Like the team is moving really
like it. Pretty often. Yeah, pretty fast-paced development over there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could show you actually connecting to it. I was having it deploy while we were talking, although it is in here. Maybe it did deploy successfully, and I just didn't get a good error message around it. Yeah, still provisioning.
So one thing I would want to mention, Cody's talked about the Helm chart and that being a way to deploy Consul into stand-up environments. Folks might be wondering, what's the value of HCS? Or this seems like it's also standing up Consul. Why would I use one over the other? What HCS, HashiCorp Consul on Azure is really designed to do is it's a fully managed service of Consul. And so you can deploy and stand up a Consul environment and start consuming it from day one. It would be a production-ready cluster with security already in place, all of the servers set up in a way that's highly available. And then HashiCorp has a team of SREs that would be managing the lifecycle of those servers going forward, performing all the backups, maintenance, scaling servers, anything that might be needed from an operations perspective. So you as a organization can simply consume it as a service, really without having to know how to operationalize this and run it in production. And when things break, you have HashiCorp's SRE team that you can call up and say, fix this, rather than requiring that expertise in-house in order to maintain Consul. So that's really the value of this. Consul it has a lot of moving under the hood. Cody spoke about the gossip communication, the ACLs. Obviously, it uses a distributed consensus system, uses Raft under the hood for data storage, so similar to etcd, and you have to make sure you have a certain number of nodes that are always available in order to have your data stored. There's a lot of complexities in just managing that, and if you're not wanting that operational overhead, HCS is a really good alternative to, again, provide a fully managed service for that.
Along with that, you might have just said this, Blake, actually, but SLAs, SLOs are part of the offering?
They are, and I don't have exactly what those would be, at least offhand, but definitely, this is an SLA-backed service as well.
Okay. And yeah, apologies, you might have just said this as well, but the line that delineates, or rather, let me ask this, to what extent is the user empowered to make breaking changes, if you will? Like, where's the line by which you're delineating, HashiCorp's HCS's responsibility?
Yeah, so in HCS, HashiCorp is managing the Consul servers and the health and availability of those. And then you're bringing the clients, whether those clients are on virtual machines in Azure or Kubernetes clusters, and connecting those into the servers. And so on the client side, you're able to make changes and manage configuration of them directly. Obviously, via the Consul API, there's a number of a lot of configurations that are exposed via just using this pure service discovery, or even within service mesh, you would have full control of those. It's more so, I would say, the server configuration, maybe backup policies or things like that you may have to reach out to the HCS team if you need to change those. I guess I don't want to speak too much. I know a lot of this in development. I don't know exactly what we plan to, what knobs are going to be available on GA, and then kind of what the roadmap is going forward. But the idea is that you wouldn't have to worry so much about all of the back-end kind of operational, how do I keep my servers running, and you really just focus on how do I get value out of this as a product. So anything, all the knobs that would be kind of related to that, you would have control of those.
And the thing to think about there is that, like, this is, I mean, we brought this out into public beta just a couple of weeks back. So there's a lot of changes planned. You look at 1.8 will certainly be part of the general availability release, which will change the landscape quite a bit of even HCS, by bringing things like the Ingress Gateway and the Terminating Gateway into HCS. It's going to change sort of some of the ways that you would operate the platform. So to Blake's point, a lot of this stuff is still very very fluid, and we don't want to talk too much about where things are going to go, but I would not expect things to stay the same way they are right now, for sure. The other thing that I think is really interesting to think about with running, I think what's really interesting about running Consul in Azure directly as a managed service is kind of the integration path. When you think about being able to run some of the Azure DevOps tools and pipelining tools against deployments and have those integrate into your service mesh, to me, that's the dream, right? If I can have a pipeline that deploys a new application for me and configures traffic splitting policies that split traffic between the previous version and the new version, that's the dream. When I don't have to think about building all that stuff out, that's pretty cool. And a lot of that stuff's not fully baked right now, but that's the kind of stuff that gets me really excited about the unique reasons to run this as a managed service and have it just the same way that you run your pipelines in that case as a managed service. Being able to tile it together in Azure is a pretty cool thing. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm a little locked out from being able to do the other join to environment demos, so I really apologize for that. This gives me a reason to come back and visit you guys again soon.
What's the easiest place that folks can find the previous demos that you've done of HCS and kind of showing these clusters that are actually joined to the environment?
Yeah, so the best place is the HashiCorp blog. So if you go hashicorp.com/blog and you hit the Consul filter, you'll see my name pop up in there. So there we go. So that's the video I had of, and I'll add these to the notes if you want, Lee. This is the one for managing application traffic. This is one bringing virtual machines into the service mesh. And then I've got another one in here that's just an intro video and where I join the AKS cluster. And each one of those has they're very demo heavy videos. They're literally all demo. I tend to avoid slide presentations whenever possible and jump into demo as much as possible. So
yeah, no, a link to these would be great, and the meeting minutes would be great.
Yeah, I'll drop those in. No worries.
Yeah. Anyone else have have questions, comments? I think just to kind of,
Lee, can you hear me?
yep.
Lee, I have just one question from Blake. So, like we have like Azure managing the Kubernetes cluster for us, like the Consul does the same. So we have to bind that together, the Azure cluster and service mesh. And behind that, what's everything is done by the Azure HCS. Does it have to consider the secrets or configuration, everything managed by the just HCS service. So first time we have to join that cluster, but it's done by automatically by default. It is just a simple 2 steps.
I think I could probably answer that. I think I follow. So the first time you join a cluster, you do have obviously like secrets to configure. So you do have to create a secret in because there's a few things you need when you join a Consul or in regular any Consul environment. When you join a Consul cluster together, you need the gossip key if you're doing gossip encryption. You need the certificate that's running on the Consul server cluster, and then obviously you need to know the destination. So the Helm chart, the scripted creation handles most of that for you. Oh, and then also you need the Bootstrap ACL token. So most of that's handled for you by the join script that we provide. We pull down the certificate, we create a secret in the AKS cluster for that certificate. We pull down the gossip key, we create a secret for the gossip key. If you've already set up ACLs, you have to create the secret for that. And those are being created in the Kubernetes cluster that you're joining. So you create all of, like, those are pulled down out of HCS and placed as files locally and then created as secrets in your Kubernetes cluster. Then when you run the Helm install for Consul, it reads those secrets, those configurations, and joins them to the cluster. So there is a little bit of steps you have to take there to set up, basically to give it the keys, right? To give the keys to the door so it can open it and walk through. But those are things you have to do. Was that kind of the essence of your question?
Yes, that's and one last thing, that's as Azure Kubernetes Services manages the updated version of they kind of doing the update itself by the Kubernetes new version. So once that HCS, they also have a thing they call continuous updation of their console that's adopted itself. It's kind of the customer they have to do, or it's just done by default by the HCS service.
That'll be something that you would schedule. So you'd get a notification that's there's a new version available, at least for major versions, and you can schedule those upgrades. I believe there's a policy that they'll automatically upgrade for security fixes or things in the environment, to close vulnerabilities. You can get some details on that. That should all be available for sure once the service goes GA of exactly what to expect there on that front.
One last thing, I think that's quite of a I also uses the other products of HashiCorp like Terraform and Azure Key Vaults specifically. So is there any specific teams they have a Terraform script that can be generated by the HCS cluster? Isn't this a roadmap right now, or can we see in the newer version of HCS?
Cody, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we currently there is a Terraform, I would say a community support. One of our SEs built a Terraform module for deploying HCS. I just stopped sharing, but I'll fire back up sharing so I can show that real quick. 1 second. So this module will actually take you through and deploy HCS. So for those who don't know a lot about Terraform, Terraform modules are effectively shortcuts for Terraform. They run larger manifests behind them by just providing simple inputs. So in this case, if we take a look at this is like the minimum set of code that would be needed to deploy this version of HCS. So if you take a look at like a real example, I'll drag my example over that I'm using in my environment in VS Code. This is like the definition of my HCS cluster, the one that failed to deploy, or still deploy. I should say failed. It's still running the deployment. So this will give you a HCS cluster. Now you could write the Terraform manually, and if you go into here, we can actually see the module definition, which is quite long. Right here, this is the actual Terraform module, but this is actual Terraform resource. I'd obviously recommend using the Terraform module just because it's a much shorter and much simpler path forward. And that's in our Terraform registry. So if you just define out that object in your code, if you just define out module HCS, it'll reach out automatically to the Terraform registry and pull that down, pull that actual module down and be able to run it. But when we have multiple versions that are running in the environment, you will be able to configure that and say, I want to move to this version. You can declare that as code and be able to distribute this and version it and so on. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, Cody, thanks. I am really a biggest fan of Terraform. So
Yeah.
really nice to hear that there's a Terraform available here for as well. So great.
And I guess, similar to this, what we can also.
So you think about the really interesting thing there is being able to link all of this together, right? So being able to deploy, like in that example that I had up just a second ago of my Visual Studio Code, you can see I'm also deploying out my Kubernetes clusters here, my AKS clusters, and I've got 2 of them deploying, as well as like referencing existing environment stuff, right? So like that's the real power of this, is being able to chain things together and do more. What I also do in my environment, just for anecdotal conversation, I also, as soon as the first things I do, so I deploy HCS, I pull down my configurations. I actually then, and I'll bring it up here to show, I actually then go through and use Packer to build Azure image that is fully configured for Consul, so that now when I deploy my virtual machines, they're already bootstrapped for Consul. They join the Consul cluster automatically. So this Packer file will go out for me and build my VMs that have the cert already on it, that have the gossip key configured, that have the encryption stuff already set up. And then when I power those VMs on or deploy that image, it just joins them to the cluster. And it's already set up with Envoy and everything. So I just go in and add whatever application I have and restart the service, and it just works. It's much faster than going in and trying to manually install all the Consul components one by one on client machines.
Cody, is there a link or GitHub repo that's I can check out how the things going in a Terraform? I just check out the blog at the learn.azure at HashiCorp. I doesn't find that's related to the Terraform script. Can you please share them if available?
Lee, I'm going to add a lot of notes to your doc. I'm going to add a lot of links.
Blake, if you could drop in like a HashiCorp logo about this size into the doc too, that'd be
Right.
We have them. Yeah, we can throw it in.
Cody, I just wanted to ask, if we can sort of also give brief overview on the new GitHub Actions that were released by HashiCorp.
So I'm not fully primed on GitHub Actions with Terraform. It's just, so I handle Consul, so I haven't dove into those much. I probably wouldn't be much help there. So really sorry. I don't know, Blake, if John's given you the download on it yet.
No, I haven't. Cody and I are both on Consul, so we can answer most anything on that front. But Terraform and the other products, unfortunately, I know a little bit about each, but not enough about that particular topic.
I mean, at its core, I know it's the ability to execute, have Terraform execute, have GitHub execute Terraform code that's inside of a repo through Actions. So instead of having it execute out through Terraform Cloud or something like that, having it execute locally inside of Actions, interacting between Terraform Cloud and Actions. But the deep details and any sort of actual useful information, I'm useless on. I was so hurt by infrastructure provisioning that I ran away to service mesh. So
Nice. Well, Cody, this I think in a couple of regards, maybe this isn't a one-shot thing for having you on the call. Actually, it'd be nice to have you on the call, whether you're being put on the spot to talk about any number of things or not.
Yeah, I'd like to join again for sure. So I'll definitely be a more regular attendee.
Nice. Yeah, good. Fair enough. Well, we've developed an intentional reputation for some bad dad jokes before we get started, kind of at the start of the call, so that people have time to join. But an unintentional reputation for going a few minutes over. And I know that that's anxiety invoking for folks who have calls starting in 2 minutes. So with that, maybe if we can, let's conclude. Cody will look for, and Blake, a few of the links in the community meeting minutes. There's a couple of updates that had occurred or transpired this week that we didn't necessarily review. One of those is Kuma, another service mesh being presented for consideration for adoption into the CNCF. And so that'll be, well, actually, I hadn't thought of that. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was going to make a call for interest in those that might be interested in being a tech lead on the CNCF's SIG network. There's a bunch of work to be done there. Part of that is reviewing projects. And so whether or not, so whether or not people step up to do that type of a thing, here we're going to be talking about Kuma a little bit, just like we had spoken about Chaos Mesh and heard from Litmus Chaos and Chaos Mesh a fair bit because of the overlap of the activities between this community and that SIG. And so Meshery are, the vast majority of you that are on the call, that being kind of your main focus. It doesn't yet have an adapter for Kuma, but priority-wise, actually in advance, priority-wise for the project, in advance of creating an adapter for Kuma, up-leveling the adapter for Consul is, well, as you can see by what Cody and Blake have been showing, is a much-needed thing. There's much functionality to expose that today Meshery isn't. And so, so that's a kind of another call for attention to that adapter by those that are in the community. Great. With that, I said that we would.
We just wanted to ask if we can sort of discuss on briefly about the fellowship program.
Yeah, please go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, so around 11 days ago, I had applied for the fellowship program for Meshery. So basically, the MLith fellowship program is a very new program that is coming up. So basically, MLith is Major League Hacking, which has been organizing hackathons throughout the world, and it is one of the most oldest organization which organizes for high school and for college level school students. So they have partnered with companies like Facebook, GitHub to organize this open source program which will be very similarly based, for example, how the Google Summer of Code works, where students will be given open source projects. So some projects like the React project from Facebook is also part of it. So since Facebook is partnering, so I applied for Meshery to be a part, and they were very happy to have Meshery onboarded as a potential project. So they have already sent out the documentation for filling it out, so that it becomes. So basically how this will work out is that Meshery itself will be like a project maintainer. So basically the main role for us as the community will be to just sort of lead in what exact fronts do we want, or which particular projects do we want that to happen. How it's structured is that there are a bunch of students, for example, 12 students, say, working together, and they have one collective or say two collective mentors who will be, mentoring these 10 to 12 students. So all of them will be like given allocated as like say a particular project, and how we will be, interacting. For example, if Meshri is it's participating, so there will be a single point of contact between the project maintainers and the mentors. So mentors will not be from Meshri, because they are being hired from separately from a company by the name of raise.dev. So like that will be the kind of point of interaction that we'll be having, where we'll be sort of just giving them, these are the expectations for the whatever project that we choose upon. So I guess since a lot of the focus is to geared towards like cloud programming and like JavaScript. So since Meshri is also based on React, so again, like if there are some like front end based iterations that need to be done, or say at least on the back end, so like those are the potential projects also that can be like taken up. So this is how the entire MLIT's fellowship program is geared towards, and it's currently going to start from around July, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, or at least like mid of June till like September. So it will be running sort of parallelly with GSOC. So if like if some people are also interested, they can also apply for it. But yeah, like Meshri will be part of it. And yeah, just one last thing, that basically in the recent GitHub announcements that took place in the satellite, there was a new feature with the name of discussions. So basically, if anyone wants to see, they're like right now live on the Zeit, which is the next.js framework, and like I had applied for discussions for the beta version. So there are like a few companies which are part of it. But basically, how GitHub discussions works is that it basically provides you. So we have something like issue tracking, and where people can discuss on say different issues. But basically, GitHub discussions is that it provides you a very in general multiple room setup, where you can discuss say in general, not say totally technical things related. So for example, onboarding new people. So it's something like we have Slack over here where we're discussing. We have different channels, so you can create over there, and then you can directly link your issues. So basically, it does have a potential use. I had like spoken to Lee about this earlier. So I mean, I do find that we can have some kind of suitable role, where at least for example, when we are onboarding new developers, so we can provide them resources over there. We can have separate rooms for each and every different say for one for Meshri, for different adapters, say one for onboarding, one for like the issue tracking or whatever discussion we want to have. Because like some companies have totally moved their entire sort of these conversations that they have directly on GitHub itself, since now they are directly managing, because it becomes very easier to like refer to one problem. Otherwise we would want to copy and paste the issue or the pull request in Slack itself. So I mean that we have a potential use, like it can be tested out. So basically we just now need to go to the settings page of Meshri and enable it. Yeah, like it's a beta version, so I mean we can definitely use it in just in case if it's like viable. I mean we can at least test it out. So yeah,
Those are both good. They're both really exciting, Shibai. We'll make sure that everyone here, and like, almost everyone on the call is a member of this org, and so that'll be nice for everyone to get to play with discussions and see just how well. I guess I'll say it like this: we've seen container orchestrator wars, proxy wars, service mesh battles happening. I think we'll be seeing the battles of the hubs soon. If you attend DockerCon, you'll see what I mean. Very good. All right. Well, we didn't. Hey, we're only 7 minutes after, so thank you everyone for coming. Great update, Shibai. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Blake. See you guys next week.
Thanks, Lee. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.